Today I'm going to walk you through a walk cycle, and I'm going to take you through all the steps of drawing it out as well as putting it on your phone and turning it into a GIF. This walk cycle is going to be a blank, so you don't need to make it perfect or detailed. It's just going to be a blank that you could use later to convert a character to a walk cycle. So I'm going to draw a line, and that's going to be my contact line. That's the point on the ground where my feet are going to touch. And I'm going to number that line 1 through 5 with even spaced marks. And I'm going to number this sheet of paper number 1. I'm going to take 3 more pieces of paper for a total of 4 pieces of paper. And I'm going to lay that line in and number it exactly where the other ones were. So I'm tracing it up. I'm putting the old one underneath, putting a blank sheet of paper on top, and I am tracing out these lines on top. That's important. We're going to do a lot of tracing up as we go. Tracing up is how we're going to make sure that we're referencing the drawing before whenever we're doing drawings for animation. Some people try and guess where stuff should go, and it never works out. It always looks terrible. Ideally, we would all have light boxes and animation registers and things like that to kind of register our paper all in the same way with light shining through so we could see through multiple pages. But we are not living in that world, so we are just going to use copy paper and do our very best to work from one layer. So almost done registering these. And we're going to end up today with 8 drawings. Do not just do 4 drawings. You need 8 drawings. You do 4 drawings, guess what grade you get? If it's perfect, you get a 50%. So that's not good. So I'm going to jump back here to drawing number 1. And the first thing I'm going to do is kind of guesstimate where my body position goes and the general angle of the body position. Since I'm moving forward, I kind of want my character to lean into the walk a little. You'll see later I kind of adjust that line because I felt like it was too aggressive. And the very first picture, my feet are going to be contacting the ground on number 1 and number 5. And I'm going to kind of use some simple shapes and lines to build this. I'm not trying to get every muscle detail or any detail in my character at all. I'm creating a blank. So I could go back in and turn this into an insane superhero rabbit if I want to, or a little kid with a hatchet. It's whatever you want later. But today, all you have to do is create a blank and test your blank. Now, if you are unsuccessful and you turn this in, I am going to tell you to print the sheets and trace them to get your grade where it needs to be, but also so that when we go to the next part of the project, you know what you're doing. Anytime we do a walk or a run, our opposite arms are going to be going in the same direction. So if my left foot is forward, my right arm will be forward, and if my right leg is back, my left arm will be back. That's important. It is abnormal to walk the other way. And once you get better at animation, if you choose to make a crazy weird walk cycle for one of your characters, where the whole right side and the whole left side move together, that's something you could do. So there's drawing 1, contact point 1 and 5. Hopefully you're following along so that you don't have to move too slowly. Pause the video when you get to a point where you need to stop or pause for a minute so you can keep going. Change the head. I did not like that big clunky head, so I kind of made the head smaller. Using erasers to kind of clean some of this up a little. I don't need that angle line because I didn't make it as severe. Notice how I'm thinking about my legs in 2 parts and my arms in 2 parts, even if they're straight. That's important. So that's drawing 1. So now I'm going to go to drawing number 2. And my foot that's on the ground in front is going to be constantly sliding backwards because we are walking in place. So if my front foot is on number 5, my back foot is on number 1, my back foot's got nowhere to go. So it's going to lift up off the ground, and then my front foot is going to drag into position 4. Here I am showing you that the head is going to bob. Drawings 1 and 3, I'm going to have a midpoint head, and then I'm going to have low points and high points too, and I'll show you that, and I kind of want to just establish those. So here off drawing 1, I'm going to kind of lay those points in. Drawing number 2, he's going to stomp down on that front foot, put all his weight on it. He's going to squash a little bit, and I'm going to use that low point. But I'm going to try and offset my whole paper evenly all the way around, because I'm going to trace my head and body so there's consistency in my drawing. And here I'm trying to show you they're consistent, and then I move it and I ruin it. So I want to get it consistent, so the top of my head goes to that low line, and then my space on the sides is even so that I know it's moving kind of diagonally through the paper. Tracing the head and the body. And then I'm going to line it back up with the 1. Here I'm just writing mid and low, so you know. We're only doing 8 frames today. That means we're working 8 frames per second. Most real animations film at 24 frames per second, or if there's not a lot of action, they'll film at 12 frames per second. But we're not going to, we're just filming at 8. Because 24 frames means that for every 1 drawing we're doing, we would be doing 3 drawings. That's a lot. It would result in a much smoother animation, but it would also be an extremely cumbersome amount of work. I like to shade the far leg so that it just kind of helps me understand which leg's in front, which leg isn't, although my overlapping lines are going to help me with that information. Some of you are still failing to do good overlapping lines in your work where I can tell what's in front, what's behind. You're sharpening or inking right through everything, and it's not the most successful way to work. I want you guys to show me what's in front with your lines. That's overlap. That is important. So I'm stomping down, putting all my weight on that front foot, lifting my back foot up. Notice how my leg is not just hanging out the bottom like a tag. My butt is part of my back and torso. My shoulder is part of my back. So when I am drawing the arm and the leg, they're kind of built off the torso. They're not just hanging off like a piece or, like I say, a tag. They're kind of structurally integrated into the body. That's important. Very little of that back arm is showing. He's starting to pull it back towards the front. Now I've got drawing number 2. So I could put drawing number 3. I have to relabel these because I made a mistake. I could put drawing number 3 on top of 2, but I don't want to do that because every time I draw, I'm going to get smaller and smaller and make small differences. So what I want to do is go back to drawing 1 every time when I trace the body and head, and it'll help me maintain the most amount of consistency. So again, it says 4 down there in the corner, but this is 3. And I'll change that in a sec. I realized it afterwards. I grabbed the wrong sheet. So I'm tracing the head and body off of 1 so that everything's traced off of 1 so I have the most consistency. And my foot was on 5, then it was on 4, now it's dragged back to 3. It is important that my foot on the ground have a consistent amount of movement, and that's why those spaces are very important, because if I don't have that, it is going to look choppy and awkward. The leg in the air can move at different speeds because it is not being controlled by gravity, and different movements are easier for us, and oftentimes those movements are inconsistent. You know, like our arm might slow down or speed up as we're moving it, or as it gets some momentum, it might swing out. So here, he's kind of pushing back against that, so he's at the midpoint on the head. That way I don't have to offset the paper from one at all. This is called the cross in animation in a walk cycle, where the one leg begins to cross the other leg. So I drew the whole leg just for consistency, and then I erased the back leg out of the front leg. So I have good overlap, but also I draw the whole thing so I have good structure. Drawing the arm from the back, from the shoulder as one continuous movement. And since this is 4, this is actually, this is where I switch it to 3. So since this is 3, I want to think about how this is going to lead into 4. It's going to end up the opposite of 1. Drawing number 5 will be the opposite of 1. So I'm trying to get there not too quickly, but not too slow either, because I don't want to have a big movement jump in my drawing at all. So I'm looking and thinking about where I need to end up based on the opposite drawing of number 1. Trying to stay light, loose, confident, using simple shapes to build my structure. If I want to build complex details on top of it later, that's fine, but not for this project. All right, so now it's time for number 4, the actual number 4. And again, I'm going back to drawing number 1 for my tracing, but this time I'm going to put the head at the high position. Okay, so I'm kind of finding that high point, and I'm going to drag that down to where the top of the head is. I'm going to make sure I have that consistency along the side and the top now, the other side and the top, because now he's moving diagonally the opposite way. And I'm going to trace out that head and body. This is a lot to do, and I hope you're able to follow along. Tried to leave a little space in the video, timing-wise, so you guys have time to stay caught up. But if you have to pause it, go ahead and pause it. So final position, he's in 4. That is going to go to back to 1, which, as we know, drawing number 1, the feet were at 1 and 5. So we're going to flip it. So the foot that was at 1 will now be at 5 for drawing number 5. And I'll show you how we do that in a second. But first, this is called the reach. He's stretched way out. Remember, on that second drawing, he was squashed down a little bit. Here, he's stretched out. We could exaggerate that if we want. We are not exaggerating this, but you can. And if we think about that ball squashing and stretching, we kind of want to think about squashing and stretching movements in our drawing all together to really exaggerate that character. Super realistic cartoons would not have that kind of squash and stretch, but to be honest, they wouldn't be walking this aggressively either. A normal walk cycle, our 5 marks would be much closer together. You wouldn't be doing this kind of high knee walking. Your feet would barely lift off the ground. It's a much more subtle action, a real and realistic walk. But we're kind of doing a cartoon walk. We want our character to bounce a lot, and we want them to, move a lot. So we've got a lot of exaggerated movement, and that's just part of how we're drawing this particular one. There are plenty of examples on the internet of subdued walk cycles that you could try on your own time. But for this project, I want you to kind of just follow along with this. Try your best to achieve this. Now I can see that if that back foot slides to 1 and that front foot extends and contacts the ground in the next picture, that will work. And that'll kind of make this the opposite drawing of number 1, where the near leg, the leg closest to me, is at 5, and the far leg, the leg on the opposite side of the body from me, is at number 1. Drawing number 1 was the opposite way. So this arm, I drew the whole arm, but that arm is on the opposite side of the body. So I'm just going to erase that. Thinking about how it still connects, though, and where it's pointing to is important to create good structure in my drawing. Again, drawing from the shoulder for the arm, drawing from the bottom of the torso for the butt into the leg as one continuous shape. It's important. A lot of you are still drawing these tag arms, and that's not good. Here, I don't like this. The line of my hand and the line of my butt line up. That's called a tangent. I either want space or overlap. I do not want them touching at the exact same place. So I'm looking at where it needs to get to for the next drawing and looking at where it was for the previous drawing, and I decide to go with the overlap because I feel like giving it space, it's too close to the final drawing. And by the way, more space equals more speed. So if we're using a set time frame. So we've got 8 frames per second. So if I move in an eighth of a second, an inch, and you move 2 inches, yours is going faster. So space equals speed because our time is a constant. So now I've got to go through and draw the whole opposite side. I don't need the registration marks. I am going to draw the contact line because it does kind of represent a little bit as a shadow where our character's casting a shadow on the ground. So I like to leave it there. I'm going to lightly trace this, not trying to be too exact so I can work quick and just keeping it real light. Some of you guys labor over every line. That's a mistake. You will not learn as much, and you will not be as quick. So here I'm going to look at it. So the far arm is in the back. So now the far arm needs to be in the front, and vice versa. So I'm going to start drawing this, and I don't want to follow my old drawing exactly, or a phenomenon known as flashing can happen, where it appears like the animation is flashing because everything kind of lines up in the exact same spot. Especially with a choppy animation, like an 8-frame animation, this effect is even more exaggerated because there's more space, and so then you've got like this exact alignment, but then you have all these missed opportunities in the middle, and they're missed in the same way for both drawings. A little bit of overlap there, that's important. Letting my arms and legs get thinner as they move towards the wrist and the ankle. Tightening them up at the joints a little bit, letting some of that lower arm, lower leg fat kind of pop out around the top of the lower arm and lower leg. Just really thinking about how I'm building this. Tracing that old drawing right now, more or less. Well, I'm not tracing it, but I have that light tracing I did. I'm using that as my guideline. And I'm kind of redrawing it because I want to keep that energy. I don't want it to get stale all of a sudden from my last 4 drawings. Some of you have traced stuff and turned it in, and I've called you on it because it's obvious when something's traced. The line is slow. It's awkward. Usually it's overly complex in some areas and overly simplified in others because you're tracing because you don't really understand what you're drawing. Tracing has a totally different line quality than just drawing. So I want you guys to be just kind of like lightly drawing. The tracing you do should just be on the top. I accidentally called that 5, that's 6. We definitely want to add 4 to every opposite drawing. So I'm tracing over drawing 2, so 2 plus 4 is still 6. Welcome to your math class, everyone. So lightly pushing it out, and here I might even make some changes while I'm doing the light tracing. That's okay. He's got his other foot up and his other foot pushed down. Remember, this is the squash. I don't have to mess around with figuring out the head alignments and stuff because I'm using the opposite drawing, and those head alignments are already set. Not trying to make a perfect drawing, just trying to create a fluid animation with some good consistent structure underneath. Consistency of movement, where the foot is sliding in the same way. Consistency of head and body size. Consistency of the shape and length of the arms and legs. These things are important. Later I can turn this into a ridiculous, complicated character, but today I'm just making a blank. And I can actually use this blank to make all kinds of different animations later on. This is a cycle too. Though it's only 8 drawings, we could cycle them infinitely, so he could just be running forever. And that's something to think about. If we put a scrolling background on there, then we could have him just run forever. Being careful to make sure this is the opposite drawing and that everything is kind of done correctly. Okay, I got to add 4 to that. This is drawing number 7. One more to go after this, guys. Now we're all done with this. At least the drawing part. We've got a little bit of computer part that we're going to do, or on your phone anyway, to turn this into a working animation. Lightly tracing the drawing out, made some changes already, like in the foot and stuff. Using the other drawing just as structure. Should be drawing this too, drawing along, tracing it out, reforming it, shading out the far arms and legs. This guy, for his far arm, not a lot of it's going to show, so I'm just going to show a little piece of hand stick out and a little piece of elbow stick out. And that's plenty. You don't need a ton of stuff. A cycle like this could also be, built on. So you could do some drawings that end the cycle so he could run for like a long time. That's me saying we only got one more. So he could run for a long time, and then you could animate him stopping the run or jumping over something or crashing into somebody. There's all kinds of ways you could build off of this basic run cycle by just taking these drawings and layering new drawings, but that doesn't mean that they'd necessarily be picture number 9 in your film. They might be picture 36 because you had him cycling the run for a while. You might notice that shape that I'm using with the hand. If you look at your fist from the side and you flatten the bottom of your hand to your forearm, your thumb and the rest of your fist kind of stick up. So that's kind of the shape that I'm going for there. Here I've changed the reach a little bit. He's a little more eager than the last guy. That far leg, I've had it slightly ahead the whole time, just so I don't get that flashing I was talking about. Now, while this is workable, if you really want to get into animation later on, you'll realize that there are some issues with this, like the fact that our torso and our face are not twisting from side to side as his body's tweaking. So when that, forearms forward and near arms back, or the near leg is back, that's going to have a totally different twist of the torso than the opposite side. But we're just doing a simple animation right now. We're not going to concern ourselves with that. I just don't want some of you to go off to college and learn the difference and be like, Mr. Wilson said. And I want you to know the difference. There are also computer rigs you can use to create these kinds of cycles out of vector drawings. It's a cheap and easy way to make animations. So I'm just kind of going through, checking it, looking for any weird inconsistencies. I feel pretty good about it. So now I'm going to take this over to the table once I feel good about it, and I'm going to use my phone and the iMotion HD to capture it. So I'm going to go to my phone, I'm going to open iMotion HD, and you guys might have a different stop motion app, but this is the one I'm going to use. And I'm going to take my pictures somewhere where they've got a decent amount of light. So make sure to set it at manual. You can see right here, that's the manual setting. And then, otherwise it's going to just start taking pictures in time lapse. Hit start. And before you go to capture, go down to the, oh, you know what I realized? This is going to come out as a square. And I want to rotate it before I start the movie. So now I'm going to open it with my phone turned sideways. It's still set to manual. Hit start. And before I get started, I'm going to hit the tools button. And that double square up in the top left, I'm going to click that. And that's the onion skin. That's going to let me see a ghost image of the old picture while I'm taking my new pictures. So I'm going to get it close, and I'm going to try and get it. You know what? There's so much shadow on this. Let me move it where I've got better lighting over here. So light's coming in from the window. It's strong light. It's coming in from a different direction than straight above, so it's not making me cast a shadow. And then I'm going to hit the capture button to take my first picture. Now, you'll see that ghost image because I went to tools and set that onion skin, so that's good. That's important. And now I'm going to line up on the bottom. I'm going to line up that bar, and I should kind of line up the sides of the paper too. This is one of the hardest things. You can also create some kind of stand to hold the phone in the same place, but I'm just using the onion skin to do it. Here's my shoe. Lining it up for the third picture. Okay, take your time to get it lined up just right. And I like to hold the phone against my body so I can at least set the height somewhat. And I don't ever let go of, I don't ever remove the contact with my body. So when I turn my body, the phone's like I'm pressed against my body to hold it in one specific place. All those marks lined up on the sides of the paper as best I can. I'm going to get all 8 of them this way. It's a little harder on these because I don't have the marks, and that line might be a different length on each one. So now I'm paying attention to the sides of the paper more. Still getting that line lined up, so it's not going up and down, but also trying to include the sides of the paper here. Taking my time getting my pictures to look right. You'll notice that I'm doing that. Hit stop twice, and then your guy is off and walking. So you probably want to set it to 8 frames per second. That means for one cycle of walk, it takes 1 second. And then I'm going to hit the GIF button here afterwards and hit Photo Library, and it's going to save it as a GIF to my phone. We have been having some problems getting the GIFs to come into Classroom, so you might have to upload it. And there it is in my photo album. You may have to upload it to Drive and then share it with me through Drive or do something like that. And there's my walk cycle. He's going to town. These are blanks, remember, and I didn't use the square. You could use the square at the beginning. I didn't use the square, so I am showing some of that table. And you'll notice like my writing and my notes are all flashing. But if you focus just on the guy, his movement's pretty good. I did a pretty good job getting consistent movement.